Alright there, rock and roll fans, this is Peter Sco from Music is a Journey. Today we're doing another first 10 albums of a band. This band released their debut album on August 31st, 1972. By the end of the 70s, they had become one of the biggest bands in the United States of America. By 1980, they'd scored a #1 hit. They got the People's Choice Awards for the best song of 1980, and as well they've released 4 consecutive albums that went 3 times platinum. Who am I talking about? Styx! So today let's take a look at the first 10 albums of Styx. Let's talk a little bit about the history of the band leading up to that first album and what happened with the band during the release of those 10 albums. Just a few things to take a look at here. This is a Circus magazine from December 11th, 1979. Styx, kicked and picked by critics and fans. Who are these guys anyway? I've got The Grand Illusion by Chuck Panazzo, the bass player for Styx, and The Grand Delusion, the unauthorized true story of Styx by Sterling Whitaker. This one I could only buy as a used copy, so it's actually in pretty tattered condition here, but nevertheless, all the information, all the pages are in there. Very interesting read. That's one of the things that I really got to like about Styx when I became interested in the band. I think it was about 5-6 years ago now, actually. They have a very interesting story, which is part of the appeal for me, and one of the reasons why I like doing these first 10 albums of a band series, because we can explore what was actually happening within the dynamics of the band during the time. Also, one other thing here, I think this magazine has showed up before, I think when I did my first 10 albums of Rush. Circus, April 1st, 1980, and with an article here, who are the concert kings of rock and roll? Styx, Cheap Trick, Foreigner, Van Halen. So this article talks about what it is each of these 4 bands have going for them that makes them such a big draw in the concert arena. So obviously by 1979-1980, Styx were absolutely huge. But let's rewind and go all the way back to 1961. When the Panazzo brothers, Chuck and John, were playing music in their home. Chuck was playing guitar, John was playing drums, and suddenly a boy who lived in another neighborhood a little bit away, and who was 2 years older than the Panazzo brothers, he popped his head in the window and said, "Hey, you guys sound pretty good. You want to start a band?" Well, that boy who popped his head in the window was Dennis DeYoung, who, as I said, lived in a neighborhood a little bit away from everybody. They kind of knew each other, but this was a chance for them to get together and actually start a band. Now at this time, Dennis DeYoung played accordion. So very, very young age. I think the Panazzo brothers were 12 at the time. Dennis was 14, and they formed the Tradewinds. And they stayed as the Tradewinds for quite some time. Initially, they played like the kind of, 100 popular songs, a lot of more traditional material. They played birthday parties and weddings. And at one time, there was an opportunity for them to play at their school dance. So they did. They were the performing band. However, they didn't really go down very well. And especially Dennis wondered why the band didn't get a more warmer reaction from the audience. They played very well. And a kindly teacher told him, "You know what? These days the kids are more into rock and roll. Maybe you guys should think of switching over to playing that." And that's exactly what they did. The Tradewinds switched over to playing rock and roll. And within a couple of years, they enlisted their college friend John Serluski to come in as a guitar player, which meant that Chuck Panazzo would have to switch over to bass. Something he was a little reluctant to do, but for the betterment of the band, he agreed to do it. So the Tradewinds actually found that they could no longer keep their name as the Tradewinds because another band with the same name managed to get a song into the singles charts. So they decided, well, now there were 4 of them, so they would change the name to There Were 4, which actually worked out rather well because Tradewinds, the initials were TW, and There Were 4, they became TW4. That worked out rather well. By the end of the 1960s, the band was starting to get known quite well around the Chicago area. They were building up a bit of a base, and they started to attract the attention of one of the local record companies. So by 1971, it was time to start thinking about getting into the studio to record an album. But they needed that 1/5 magical element to complete the band, and that was James J.Y. Young. Now, James Young actually came from the southern part of Chicago, and he was a little bit more of a rough and tough kind of guy, certainly taller than everybody else, with really long flowing blonde hair, and more into stuff like Jimi Hendrix, or I think it was Jeff Beck as well, so kind of more of that edgy guitar and dynamic guitar playing. But he was exactly the right element that the band needed. So in 1971, they recorded their debut album for Wooden Nickel, and it was released, as I said, August 31st, 1972. So here I have a kind of special Japanese reissue of the debut album. It's done as a mini album format. It actually says here in katakana, Styx instead of Styx. I think there may have been some confusion of how this name should be read, and quite honestly, I don't know. Is Styx the English pronunciation? Is it actually Styx? Because, what, the adjective is Stygian, isn't it? Or is it Stygian? I'm not sure. Anyway, lovely album cover here with a cave, looks like, and some kind of, I don't know, naked figures here, and then of course the band standing here naked with some flames. It's all about flames and nakedness and caves. And on the back, some tall buildings, probably from Chicago. But anyway, this is the debut album. Now, this one here, it's rather interesting. The opening track is actually, I think it's something like 14 minutes long, and it's in multiple parts. Oh, good gravy. It's in English in about 1/2 millimeter size letters here, or I can read it in katakana. So this was the Movement for the Common Man is the first track, which is actually divided into 4 parts. Children of the Land, which was a James Young song, a basically straight up, good solid rocking track. Street Collage, which is basically different people on the street giving their opinions about the state of the working situation or the youth today. And I find this is actually rather interesting because one guy starts off saying he was a depression baby. And that's kind of interesting to think about. That means, you know, he was born probably in the 1930s, so now he must be up to his 80s if he's still around. And then there's another guy there, he's a bus driver, and it's kind of funny because he says about this guy who got on his bus the other day, and he had long hair. No offense to you, gentlemen. So you can imagine, you know, the band members are interviewing the guy, and they all have long hair too. Yeah. And then there's also a complaint about kids these days. They have everything handed to them. They have too much money and everything is handed to them. And that's the problem with kids these days. And I thought that's really an interesting thing for them to be saying in, what, 1971 probably? Because that's something you could say about kids these days. It's probably also something you could have said about kids during my time in the 1980s or the 1990s. Or, well, just about any time you could say that. Kids these days, everything is handed to them and they have too much money. Yeah, we then go on to the Fanfare for the Common Man, which is of course a cover song. Now I've heard some people say that ELP did it much better. And yeah, you could say that for sure because, you know, ELP, we're talking about people who went to a music academy in England versus some guys from Chicago. Of course ELP did it better, but I think Styx made a good honest effort, and I think it fits in very nicely with this 4-part opening epic track that they have. And finally, what is it there? Yes, the final part is Mother Nature's Matinee. I'm trying to read this in the katakana, which doesn't have exact English pronunciation, and then I have to try to translate the pronunciation into what it would be in English. There is one other Styx original on this album. It's called Best Thing, and it was released as a single. I remember Chuck Bonazzo saying that in the first week it went to number 88, and then the next week it went to number 82, and he thought, wow, this is easy, our first single, and look, it's just climbing the charts. But after that, it disappeared completely, and it was actually not so easy. The rest of the songs on this album are all cover songs, and this band Styx actually didn't know any of these songs, and honestly, I didn't know them either until I heard Styx playing them. But it was recommended by the record label that they put on a bunch of unknown cover songs. Yeah, brilliant idea. So this album is very interesting as an opening album. I like the sound of it. It's got that early 70s, you know, rock sound. It's got the growly organ sound, the Hammond. It's got some good rock guitar. It's got some parts that are a little bit hard rocking and heavy. But of course, honestly, A lot of this album sounds like your standard American rock band of the early 70s. Like, there were so many bands at that time that released an album or maybe two albums and then they disappeared forever. And this album wouldn't really stand out among those in any way, honestly. But knowing that it Styx, it's interesting to hear how their first effort was. This is a very sincere effort, and the band obviously has talent for playing. So during the recording of this, actually Dennis DeYoung had written a song and he wanted it on the album, but the producer said, no, we should save that one for the next album. So the next album, which came out in 1973, was simply titled Styx 2. Why not? Led Zeppelin did it, right? This album here, I'm going to say right now, listening to these first 10 albums consecutively the last couple of days, the sound quality of the debut on that reissue is really, really nice. This one is from a different reissue series, and it's good, but it's noticeably different. It doesn't seem to have that same edginess. It seems to be warmer, the guitars with less bite to it. I think listening to this album on its own probably sounds just fine. I really wanted to get the mini album reissue, but it was only available for something like $80 or something out of Europe, so I gave up. Anyway, I got a used copy of this other version here, and it's fine. It is basically the band now very eager to write their own material. Particularly Dennis DeYoung has jumped on board and written a lot of songs. We have You Need Love, which on the back here is credited to Dennis DeYoung. Pretty much, again, a straightforward early 70s American rock song. But it's the next track here that's kind of of interest, and that's the song Lady, which has become a kind of classic rock staple. A very lovely ballad with the piano, written by Dennis for his wife Suzanne. She turns up in the lyrical theme of several songs throughout their career. But yeah, it develops first as a very pretty piece, and gradually the electric guitar comes in, and then it goes into a kind of bolero and builds up to a dramatic conclusion. And interesting because it just kind of repeats that kind of same verse format. It's not a song with a kind of verse, chorus, that type of thing. It just has like stage one. Similar to Jefferson Airplane's White Rabbit. You know, there is actually no chorus. It just has a series of stanzas, I guess, basically, right? We move on to A Day, and this is actually my personal favorite track on here. This is the first track contributed by John Serlewski, and it is, what, 8 minutes and 19 seconds. It is a very kind of easy, laid-back, almost spacey, psychedelic song with some really cool, like, keyboard or synthesizer effects. Some smooth guitar playing. It's just a really cool track, which is unlike anything else in the early Styx catalog. So I got to give credit to John Serlewski. His few contributions over those first few albums are always standing out for having some specific quality to them. And of course he actually penned the fourth track, You Better Ask, which is kind of a humorous American rock and roll track about the rock and roll life, or, you know, partying life with the girls. And at the end of the song we find out that he's kind of sore and has to go to the doctor, and the doctor says, you've contracted what we call a social disease. Yeah, let's call it a venereal disease, whatever. But yeah, a bit of humor to that there. So two John Serlewski songs, both quite different. Then we get a little fugue in G from Johann Sebastian Bach, courtesy of Dennis DeYoung, adding a bit of class there. And then we get on some decent rockers, Father OSA, Earl of Roseland, which is Dennis thinking back to his early days growing up in Roseland, and I'm Gonna Make You Feel It, which is just a really good rockin' song. Looks like Dennis DeYoung is actually credited with 5 of the tracks on here, John Serlewski with 2 and Johann Sebastian Bach with 1. All right. Now the interesting thing is Lady was supposed to be the big single that they'd hoped for, and they released it, but it kind of like went on the airwaves locally in Chicago and disappeared without actually ever reaching the charts. Rather a disappointment, that. And so the band soldiered on to come up with their third album. Now it seems that the second album, Dennis DeYoung was really enthusiastic about contributing songs for that one, but the third album, I think he was disappointed and he stepped back a little bit, which allowed John Serlewski to come in and write a little bit more than usual. So this is the third album, released in, is it 1973, 1974? the print is way, way too small for me to see that. Talking about that time frame anyway. The Serpent is Rising. This is an album which I think Dennis DeYoung in particular thinks of as the worst album in the Styx catalog. This was actually the second Styx album I ever bought. And actually, I quite like a lot of the tracks on here. The opening song, Witch Wolf, is one of my favorites. It is James J.Y. Young and John Serluski both really giving it a lot of energy. Some of the vocals are just those, you know, those kind of soulful, really powerful, high octane vocals, you know, and it just, how do they do that? I think it's a really cool rockin' song. They have some other interesting tracks on here, some really cool ones. I think like Young Man and what was it, 22 Years. Just a lot of fun, good, yeah, really good American hard rock style, early 70s, organ solos, guitar solos, lots of cool vocals. But then it gets kind of a little bit weird. We have this one, As Bad As It Gets, which is a John Serluski track. Yeah, it's more or less, it's alright, it's a half-decent track, but then about 2/3 of the way through, the track actually ends, and a hidden track comes on, the Plexiglass Toilet song. And this is done in a calypso style, a little bit like that Daylight Come and Me Wanna Go Home, Harry Belafonte. And it's about this, yeah, young 5-year-old boy who's, you know, scared to use the toilet. He's afraid that the lid is gonna fall on his banana, and he eats a spicy enchilada, and he's, you know, not supposed to belch and fart, and make sure you wipe the butt clean with the paper, and it's just like a really silly, silly song. Apparently just John Serluski and the Panazzo brothers playing on it. Really standing out from a Styx album, like what the heck is that? But I like it, it's hilarious. And then we get this whole like Krakatoa thing, which is again John Serluski just shouting out a poem with some dramatic echo to his voice and these weird spacey effects on the keyboards. It sounds like something from a 1970 science fiction fantasy movie. Pretty weird. And then we also have the what is it? Yeah, The Serpent is Rising, which is actually before Krakatoa, is a pretty powerful, strong piece, showing the band's more kind of serious side, maybe stretching a little bit into progressive territory. And then we've got the Krakatoa thing, which culminates with this big THX sound effects thing, you know, with like sounds getting lower and sounds getting higher. It sounds like, you know, the movie is about to start. And then finally the Hallelujah chorus with all 5 members of the band singing and Dennis DeYoung playing a pipe organ. It's kind of a strange album. It's, you know, half a decent rockin' early 70s American rock album and then some peculiar stuff thrown in there. So anyway, we're at the 3rd album, moving on to the 4th album. I think this is from 1974, Man of Miracles. They really thought, we've got to make an effort to push this, because this is our 4th album, and we're just not getting any traction with these albums here. I mean, they had a couple of songs that kind of peaked into the top 200, but they weren't like getting anywhere big. And so they went around to the local radio stations in Chicago, and they went to the biggest radio station in Chicago, the most powerful one, and they said, please play something from our album here. We really want your help to help promote this album. And the DJ they spoke to said, you know, this album's kind of okay, but I always really liked that song Lady that you had from 2 albums back. And I'm going to play that. So whether it was the disc jockey who said he was going to play it, or it was Styx that said, oh, please play it then, whatever it was, he played that song every night. I think it was at 8 o'clock for a week. And that song suddenly started climbing in the charts. And next thing you know, Styx were becoming a big name. Wow, 4 albums with Wood and Nickel Records, and it was finally, after their 4th album, a song from their 2nd album that started getting attention. This had a magical effect. First of all, it got the band a contract with A&M Records. So goodbye Wood and Nickel, and hello ugly negotiations to get out of the contract. In the end, Wood and Nickel kept the rights to all the songs written and recorded with Wood and Nickel during the time of those 4 albums anyway. And so the band were never able to actually release any of those songs themselves later on subsequent compilation albums. When they finally did release Lady on a compilation album, it was a re-recording of it. They don't have the rights to those old Wood and Nickel recordings, which means that when Wood and Nickel released a compilation of Styx songs, it was always from those first 4 albums. Anyway, they move on to A&M. Dennis DeYoung is now excited for the band. They are moving upwards, and it was his song that did it. So, for the 5th album, Dennis jumps in and takes control, writing most of the songs on the album. John Serlewski comes in with one Dear Mother and a short acoustic guitar instrumental, which apparently he struggled a lot to record. The rest of the album is pretty much Dennis DeYoung. Usually James gets a song on here somewhere. Like, he actually wrote a fair bit over those first 4 albums, but I forget what song it is now. He might be on here in only one. This change up in the attitude, however, did not sit well with John Serlewski. I guess part of it was moving up to this bigger label and the band's frontier opening up more, but I think also part of it was just that Dennis DeYoung was taking over more authority in the band. And finally, John Serlewski decided he wanted to spend more time with his family, and so he quit the band. This, their 5th album, Equinox, I always really liked it in a way. It is a turning point because it is the band's first album with A&M Records, but the last with John Serlewski. His song Dear Mother is again a standout track for just being very unusual. Lots of synthesizer and guitar effects. The percussion is often just a running about while he sings, and there's a bit of piano filling in the gaps between the voice or some synthesizer, and then a good, you know, rockin' chorus type thing. The big track off here, of course, has to be Sweet Madam Blue, which is a kind of a more epic track, starting with a slower acoustic chords, which actually, when I listened to it yesterday, I just did my ranking of the Led Zeppelin albums, right? And I still had Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You in my mind. And I think the chord progression is the same as at the beginning of this Sweet Madam Blue. I might be wrong. I just kind of have that feeling. Because as this song started playing, I could hear in my head as the acoustic guitar in here was kind of doing the same thing, just not in a heavy way. But anyway, epic track there, and actually featuring 4 vocalists. I think Chuck Panozzo, again, adding a rare vocal here, because that whole part with the America, America, you know, the 4 voices going up. I think Chuck is down there at the bottom. Yeah, the epic track there, and then that sets a new stage for the band. New label minus one of their young members, or one of their members from the old days. So the band then gets a hold of Tommy Shaw from somewhere down south. Was it Texas or somewhere down south anyway? And Tommy brings a completely fresh new songwriting style to the band. He is a rocker. He can play some pretty good rockin' songs, but he also plays some beautiful acoustic songs and brings his own writing style and his own vocal style. Very nice singer to the band. And what happens now is Dennis DeYoung and Tommy Shaw become the principal songwriters, and James Young, who had a lot of songs on those early albums, is suddenly relegated to 1 song per album from here on in, basically. So we come out with Crystal Ball in 1976. High hopes for this one. Unfortunately, it doesn't really do so well. We had that big hit with Lady, and after that, Lorelei from Equinox, and I think it was Crystal Ball from this one here. They just didn't reach the charts to the same level as Lady did, and Dennis DeYoung is starting to get very frustrated. We've got this great band together, we can play rock, we can add in some progressive flourishes, we can add in some folk, we can add in some southern, we can do so much. We got great songs, we've got 3 singers. Why the heck are we not getting really very far? Frustrating times indeed. And when Tommy Shaw joined the band, he saw this kind of frustration with Dennis DeYoung. Why is this talented young guy so angry all the time? And that actually turned into a song for the next album, which we'll get to in a moment. But here we have Crystal Ball. This one thing I remember, I think it was in this book here, the unauthorized biography, Tommy Shaw was saying that in high school he was not popular. He's a little bit short, all right? And he's not the football team captain, right? Short, bit thin, not really your cool guy. Girls just weren't interested. He couldn't get a date for the prom for the life of him. Something to that effect. Then he joins Styx, writes a song like Crystal Ball, and he suddenly has fans across the country. And within a year or two, girls, you know, probably hundreds of thousands of girls are ready to throw their underwear at him on the stage. Or just throw it anywhere when he's around. Suddenly he's Mr. Popular. He's on the cover of like Tiger Beat magazine and so on. But anyway, this album, I kind of think of these almost as back-to-back because, yeah, John Serluski's out, Tommy Shaw's in. The writing style is similar, but still different because of the heavy Dennis DeYoung influence on here and more Tommy Shaw on here. But still a turning point, you know, joining A&M, losing a member, gaining somebody new, and now the band is set to move forward into the peak years of their career, which they do in 1977 with the release of The Grand Illusion. Now, as much as I like a lot of the songs off these early albums, I think every album has 2 or 3 songs that I quite like, some I even love. Listening to the albums in succession the last couple of days and getting to this one, I feel like this truly deserves the high ratings it gets. This album shows everything that the band was capable of doing coming together just perfectly. We have the rock sound, a little bit of hard rock at times. We've also got progressive elements. We've got beautiful piano. We've got some great organ and synthesizer. We've got fantastic guitar solos, 3 vocalists, 3 songwriters. Everything just coming together. The track list on here just plays out like a greatest hits album just about. The Grand Illusion opening track is considered one of their best songs. Fooling Yourself, Angry Young Man, that's the Tommy Shaw song written about Dennis DeYoung. One of the big songs off the album. Superstars kind of not standing out as much, simply, I don't know why, because it's actually a really, really good track, but it's surrounded by other great ones. Followed by Come Sail Away, the big track off the album. Pretty bit of piano and organ at the beginning, but turning into a Who-like song with those crashing guitar chords, lots of drama. Miss America, James Young's biting, growly, hard rock type song. Man in the Wilderness, fantastic song by Tommy Shaw. Castle Walls, a little bit slower, but again showing the band's slower side and ability to move around with a bit more of a progressive feel. And then finally the grand finale wrapping up the whole album. This was released on July 7th, 1977, so 7777. Meant for good luck, and boy was it ever good luck, because this was the first of their albums to score triple platinum, and there was more of that to come. Second one was to come out in 1978, their 8th album called Pieces of 8. This album, again, we've got a nice pair because this tends to be more on the progressive side, and this tends to be more on the hard rocking side. Dennis DeYoung is in here, Tommy Shaw and James Young, of course, is in here. He opens the track anyway with Great White Hope, another typical hard rockin' song. But most of the album has more of a hard rock feel to it, which is actually really cool. Even the song Renegade, which is one of the big tracks off this album here, was originally written as more of a folk type song, but Dennis DeYoung claims to have told Tommy, hey, let's make it more of a hard rock type of track, and that's what it became. You have Blue Collar Man, Long Nights, also one of the big tracks off of here. And again, as with The Grand Illusion, this is an album that pretty much you can listen to from start to finish. And it's cool tracks all the way through, basically. I really like the song I'm Okay, which was Dennis DeYoung's affirmation, self-affirmation, where he realized, I don't have to please everybody. I don't have to do what everybody else is saying that I should do. My band has become a success. I'm a success. By being myself, I'm okay. And that's the feeling behind that song there. So yeah, really cool rockin' album, and that's 2 great albums. Now, the next album, the ninth one, gets a bit of criticism for being less of a hard rock album. Cornerstone here from 1979 shows the band going into a more pop phase, which is true to an extent. We have got some very catchy choruses with harmony vocals. I'd say half the tracks on here, at least half, have that kind of approach. Gosh, what was it? I mean, it's just like the opening track, Lights, which is Tommy Shaw, Never Say Never. I don't know, like there's just, it's the kind of music that I probably grew up hearing around me and never really thought much of it. But listening to it now, I shouldn't like it, but I do. For some reason, these really bright, poppy, late 70s rock songs, I actually quite like those the best on this album. There are two tracks, however, that I am not particularly fond of. One of them, Babe, a song that Dennis DeYoung actually wrote as a birthday present for his wife. And he played the song at, I guess it was at her birthday party, and some people from A&M said, "Oh, is that a new song for this next Styx album?" And he said, "No, it isn't." They said, "I think you should put it on the next Styx album. That'll be a great song." And so it was decided that that song should be released as a single, and it went to #1. Way to go, Dennis. Birthday song for your wife becomes #1. And that is also the song that was given the People's Choice Award for Best Song of the Year in 1980. So, fantastic. Another boost to Dennis DeYoung's ego. Self-confidence. Did I say ego? And so he decided that the other ballad on the album that he he wrote, should also be released as the next single. However, Tommy Shaw put his foot down and he said, if we release two ballads one after the other, what's that going to do to our hard rock fan base? People are going to think that we've become a ballad band. And he put his foot down saying, if that song gets released, I'm quitting. This actually was the first of the tensions in the band really starting to appear. And in fact, at one point, the band actually voted that Dennis DeYoung be fired. However, it didn't last long. They brought him back in again before the news actually leaked out. And this is something that I remember now in this book here. There were these moments of tension. There was one point where even Dennis was thinking to kick Chuck Panozzo out of the band and get in a more versatile bass player. But the rest of the band objected and Chuck stayed. And to be fair, Chuck is not Geddy Lee or Chris Squire or Jack Bruce or anyone like that, but he does play what he needs to play for the music of Styx. There are moments his bass actually stands out, not for technical playing, but just simply it stands out at that point in the song. He's doing a fine job. And I think if you kick out Chuck Panozzo, you're going to lose John Panozzo, who was a really, really good drummer. Excellent. This band actually really had a lot of talent. Whether you like the music or not, they were a talented bunch. Also, one other thing I gotta say here about Dennis DeYoung, when he's singing about being a highwayman, being a buccaneer, being observing social matters in America, writing a song about the future of America, even if he's writing a song about dressing up as a robot, I'm fine with it. I think he does a great job. He is a very good singer. He can hit the high notes. He can give out a good powerful scream. He can put in the vibrato. He is a great singer and he's a very good player and a great visionary for what he wanted Styx to become. However, when he's singing so enthusiastically or so romantically about the woman that his heart is for, I just find it to be a bit cringy for my taste. My apologies to Dennis, I think you're great. But yeah, those songs about how much you love that girl are not the songs I really like. So, one more song you gotta mention off this one here is Tommy Shaw's Boat on the River. This was a song that had a kind of folky feel to it, and Dennis really encouraged that. He thought it should be a great song, and Dennis actually plays the accordion on here, which is the instrument he played way back when, in the early 60s, before switching to keyboards. We've got Chuck Panozzo playing a stand-up bass on here, and John just playing like very simple percussion to it, but it is a great folky feeling song. But it went nowhere in America, which really puzzled Dennis DeYoung, who expected that this song should do really well. However, it did do really well in Europe. So at least we can see where the taste for that kind of music is. I really like it. I love the sound of accordion in a song. I don't want it on a whole album, but you know, in the 80s, a lot of the Canadian bands I picked up, like Blue Rodeo, the Northern Pikes, Bare Naked Ladies, Moxie Fruvis, Great Big Sea, and several others, they had some tracks with accordion in, and I got used to that sound. I really liked it. So I like it on here too. Great song. I thought I would be disappointed with this album. I really like it. But, as we said, the tensions are appearing. Now, up to the 10th album, we come to Paradise Theatre, actually released in 1981. And guess what? It is the band's 4th album to reach triple platinum status. They're really on a roll. No wonder they were mentioned in all these magazines here. This was a kind of a concept album about the Paradise Theatre in Chicago, which opened in 1928 and closed in, I think it was 1958. Interesting bit of trivia on the cover, it is spelt theatre R-E, the British way, but on the back cover where it's closing, it is spelt theatre E-R, the American way, which makes me wonder why. Were they going for a British flavor, or did Americans still spell it R-E at that time? Not 100% sure. Concept album. This album, while the other one was a little more poppy, they've brought the rock back in a bit, and there's a really nice balance between the rock side, the pop side, and of course the concept album progressive side. This is a really good balance of their material. Once again, we've got some really cool songs on here. We've got Too Much Time on My Hands, Tommy Shaw getting up to number 9, I think it was, with that one, his highest charting song ever with Styx. And yeah, a really solid album, doing very well for the band. I like a lot of the tracks on here. James Young also getting one song on here. We've got actually a song called Snowblind, which is about cocaine addiction. That was actually a problem. And that's it. That is the first 10 albums of Styx. So what on earth was happening with the band? It was a concept album, and Dennis DeYoung was, of course, very much involved in the process. If we check the songwriting credits for these last few albums, everybody's involved. Well, at least the 3 principal songwriters are involved. It is a band effort. But Dennis is putting in his ideas, his vision for the band more and more. And that would actually be a problem for their 11th album, Kilroy Was Here, which was supposed to be a full-blown concept album, which Tommy Shaw objected to and was backed up by basically the rest of the band in silence. And after the tour for the 11th album, they basically all just walked off, and Styx was kind of in limbo, Tommy Shaw officially quitting the band. And yeah, we see once again that bands, you know, they reach that big success point somewhere between their 3rd and 4th album and through to their 7th or 8th album. They're doing really, really well. But by the 10th album, someone has quit the band, someone has already quit earlier, or the band is about to break up, or there are big disasters. Looking pretty ugly there. So yeah, Styx is no exception to that there. And in a way, I almost feel there are some parallels with Pink Floyd, because we saw kind of the same thing, that once they released Dark Side of the Moon, and Roger Waters gradually became the principal leader of the band there, writing most of the songs, singing most of the songs, and deciding what the next album was going to be all about, coming up with all the concepts, and in the end, he, you know, walked out of the band. Tensions between him and David Gilmour especially. Styx, we see a similar thing happening with the tensions especially building between Tommy Shaw and Dennis DeYoung. Tommy Shaw just finally thinking, I'm not having fun doing this. I'm making millions, I'm doing what I love to do, and I'm not enjoying it. And realizing that it's because he's not happy being in Styx, and finally it's Tommy Shaw who walks off. That concludes our look at the first 10 albums of the band Styx. So thank you for watching the video, and we'll see you for another one a little bit later on. Cheers, everyone.